So if we talk about the first tour, I mean, what was it like, that first gig at Glasgow as you walked out on stage?
Oh, it was daunting, solid. I'd already been blown away though when we got to stage rehearsals. I used to rehearse forever. I was really picky about wanting it to be absolutely perfect. But I remember we did the rehearsals in this old theatre somewhere, and seeing flight cases with my name on it, and walking around backstage and seeing these huge, massive cables and dimmer racks, and it was all so big time. It was all so rock starry. It's just getting another one of those sort of dream come true moments. I spent as much time wandering around the back just looking at all this stuff as I did at the front, to actually seeing it all lighting up. And I was very, very involved with all of the lighting. And sort of my idea is to have the columns and to have the perspex. I wanted light that went forward without blinding, so it had to be dispersed, which is different thicknesses of perspex until you got it right. All this sort of stuff that had gone into putting it all together, and so I felt very much as if it was sort of my little project, and I was really proud of it. I thought it looked stunning. Still I do. I still think it looked brilliant. And so when it came to rehearsals, I was so proud of it. But felt very much as if I was kind of the weak link in the whole thing, because I had this real thing about my voice. I didn't like my voice very much, and I knew that I was a bit awkward on stage. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't have a guitar now to hide behind. So I was really worried about my contribution to the whole thing. I thought the set looked good. Very pleased with that. The music was alright. The band were good. They could all play really well. It's just me at the front, and I was the one that sort of people were going to be looking at. So I felt the weight of that quite badly, especially on that first tour, and particularly on the first night in Glasgow, which is it's gone now, but it's quite a big place, and massive stage, but at the same time it's the most amazing thing you've ever done, and everything you've dreamed about it for years and years and years, and it's such a moment to actually be there. So there's a mixture of terror and everything you've ever wanted. It's a fantastic moment, really. And that whole tour, the whole experience of the tour, the whole thing about touring, although overall it took me a few years to really get into it and to really enjoy it, and I had certain problems on that first one. But
is that the fire extinguisher incident at the end? You were getting a bit stressed by the end.
Yeah, I got a bit stressed. A bit stressed out. It was people, really. The thing that stressed me most of all was how people are. How they can be. You're the one that's meant to be this sort of weird pop star, and I felt like I was the only one that was actually normal. People around you are treating you really strangely and being really offensive, or crying when you met you, and just really you're exposed to quite a lot of extremes in any given day, in any given minute normally, and it's all a bit weird, and you do your best to sort of deal with it, but sometimes it just gets at you a little bit, and you probably seemingly overreact to a particular situation. But there's been 1,001 weird little things that day where you just feel like a goldfish in a bowl. It's good and bad, But it is an amazing thing. It really is. I would recommend it to anyone. I just recommend it when you're a bit older, or a bit more grown up. Really, I was very childish.
And you talked about wanting to get the grooves and the power in the music. It must have been amazing to hear. There's one thing playing things in a studio or through a hi-fi, but there's another thing actually through a PA, isn't there?
Yeah. To hear the stuff played live. Again, it's slightly I feel slightly awkward talking about it because the power that we generate now is in a different league altogether to what we did then. But at the time, to hear those songs that I'd only heard in the studio before, albeit nice and loud, but to actually hear them coming out of a big system, and to feel the seats shaking underneath you, and to see all the lights kicking off, and it just looked spectacular, and it sounded massive, and I loved it. It was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. I loved it.
And you had OMD supporting you on that first tour. So did you watch them most nights? Did you get a chance to see them? Or?
Yeah. And I loved them. I thought they were great, and I knew that money was a bit of an issue, so I said that we would carry their equipment on our trucks, and they could travel with us on our coach and all that sort of thing. So, and didn't charge them to do it. No, didn't ask them for any money to do it. So I just wanted it to be a really friendly, happy thing, because I was having such a brilliant time, and it was great. It was a lovely atmosphere. It really was. There's a few things here and there. I had a security man that was a bit of a knobhead. I think at Coventry started hitting people with mic stands, and that sort of upset me a bit. And then I think that DJ gone now, Simon Bates, said on the radio that I'd run off the stage in tears. No, bloody never. That really annoyed me now. I had a right scream and shout at people on stage. Well, fucking upset. First of all, that the crowd had been silly, but most of this bloke they're just kids, eating kids with mic stands, but they were trying to get on the stage, and what are you doing? Big oaf. So, we had dressing rooms are broken into and stuff stolen, and there's loads of that sort of stuff going on. But we had some of the gigs. We had police escort. Right. How cool is that? Police escort, to keep people back. That's great. Yeah. It's really good on that. When you've gone from being in a punk band and no one knows who you are, and no one's interested, and next time you're on stage and you've got a police escort, it's a very satisfying moments. It's brilliant. It was really good. I for all of the stresses and strains of it, which probably nowadays wouldn't bother me at all anyway. It's because I was just young, and it was all so new and so massive, and there is a lot of pressure, and the press have been horrible, and so you felt everything that was brilliant sort of was kind of had a little tarnish to it as well. So you're still sort of fighting to get over what you're trying to do and project yourself, and there was plenty of people that still just thought it was rubbish music that would be gone tomorrow. And so you still feel as if you've got an awful lot to prove, no matter how big you are and how many records you've sold and how big the gigs are. You still felt that you had all this to prove, and you're young, and it's all a bit much. But I got far more, really good, happy memories of it than I had bad ones.
Yeah, because the weird thing is, in a strange way, the fact that it was such a big show with all the lights and the towers and all that, there was actually press people sort of depicting you as running to the bank, because it seemed that there's this sort of weird mentality, isn't it? Because it's all
there's
there on
caricatures
display.
of me, isn't there? So I remember one in particular, a caricature of me running from a gig to the bank with all money pouring out my pocket. Yeah. Yeah, and I never made any money from gigs for about the first 15, 20 years or something.
It's almost like a seen as a display of wealth or something. Do you know what I mean?
That upset me. At that time I was the only person I can think of that were doing shows that big, that expensive, and yet my ticket prices were the same as everybody else's. In fact, were lower than a lot of people that were around at the time that weren't doing anything like that. So that was me putting, a fortune back into it to say, first of all, to say thank you, and because I just thought that's what we were supposed to do. And yet I'm being accused of sort of being money grabbing, and I'm probably the only pop star at that time that wasn't making any money from touring, and yet I'm the one getting slated as a money. Why was that going on? I don't know why that was. They must have known that. They must have.
I don't know. I don't think journalists think that way.
Really?
They sort of think more. Like I say, I think it's connected with the stuff we were saying about the music being very isolated and it's not communal, and there was all these issues, wasn't there, about it being show business and about bringing the pop star thing back, and you did do it in the strongest way possible. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's going to be reaction to that, and there is this weird thing, as I say, where if you think logically about it, it doesn't make any sense that someone's obviously spent a fortune in staging this to say they're running to the bank, but it is almost like it's sort of having a sort of futuristic Ferrari on stage or something in the minds of how they saw it, I think, a little bit. Do you know what I mean? It's this sort of it's that sort of attitude, So it's actually cooler, or was cooler, for a moment there to hide your wealth or pretend you're not got it.
The funny thing is, though, those shows, I didn't have wealth.
Yeah.
Yeah. There it is. I just spent a lot. I was disappointed that there wasn't any recognition of the amount of effort and time, obviously, and money that had gone into making those shows, the best of their kind, I think. At that particular time, I expected to get a certain amount of credit for that. That I had all this success, but there it was going straight back into the fans again, and particularly the whole ticket price thing really bothered me. Because it's quite common now, if you go to see a big show at the O2 or wherever, you're talking some serious money.
Yeah, 70 quid or
for your ticket. 70 quid or more.
Yeah.
And because the artist is making the fans pay for their great big show, and I didn't do that. My ticket prices were the same as everybody else's, as I said, if not a bit lower at the time, and so the full burden of that, if you like, was coming out of my own pocket. So I thought that was quite a nice thing to do, and I did that for years and years and years.
And what was it like to go over to the States to do that massive TV show that you did, Saturday Night Live? I mean, that must be a moment where you really feel that I guess it's like another Top of the Pops moment, would you say?
Well, I didn't realise how big the programme was.
Right.
So I was sort of, luckily actually, because I think I'd have been a bit overwhelmed by it if I'd have realised just how massive it was as a programme. We did another one. We did a talk show called Merv Griffin.
Oh, okay.
Which I was a bit more aware of. And in that visit, we did both of those programmes. So, collectively, those two things just introduced us to the whole of America.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember driving away from when we did Saturday Night Live, driving off soon after that anyway, and just stopping at some little, I don't know, hamburger place probably, and people sort of rushing out and girls screaming, and how did that happen? And it was just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, because it was kind of unexpected. I didn't realise just how important the things I'd done were. I knew nothing about America at all, and just that moment, the moment when it all starts to happen, it's an unrepeatable thing, obviously, but it's so special. When it was happening here, that the feeling that you live with every hour of the day of the whole world suddenly opening up, it's just the most amazing feeling.
Yeah.
Because that's before all the shit starts, and all the other stuff comes in, and before it becomes a business, and before it becomes a career, and all that sort of stuff, and it becomes it's still fun and all that, but it's never quite the same as that moment of innocence when it's all just and you're sort of like big-eyed everywhere, and it's just amazing. And anyway, I had it here, and then got to America, and exactly the same thing sort of happened. It just suddenly went, just fantastic, absolutely fantastic. You in a way you sort of want to. It would be nice to relive it, but with a more aware head. But then again, it wouldn't be the same if you did that. It's just something fantastic about it.
I mean, I just think it's in some ways I think you're starting to get the credit for it now. But if you think how even over here, you know, the charts were quite conservative when Our Friends Electric broke through. You know, I think you mentioned Ring My Bell and stuff like that. You know, there was all this disco stuff around. But in America, I mean, it was really deep set, wasn't it? I mean, it's all REO Speedwagon and soft rock and disco. And then
pretty much,
and then there you are. And even people like Bowie had not really broken through. You know, their electronic albums like Low wasn't a big seller, you know, in America. And, you know, there were executives trying to get him to write another Young Americans, you know, in that period. Yeah. And then there you are on this massive TV show doing things like Cars and praying to the aliens. Yeah.
Strange, isn't it?
I mean, for me, it's a great moment where, you know, it's so different, and it's one of those fantastic moments where something very different gets mass exposure, which is almost impossible to achieve. But there's just moments when that happens, and for me, that's one of them. You know.
But it goes back to here. You know, I would never have got a Merv Griffin or Saturday Night Live if I hadn't have had the success here. It doesn't matter what label. I was with a big label over there, at Co-Atlantic. So obviously very, very, very powerful. But you know, I'm absolutely convinced that if it hadn't have happened here first, then there would have been no leverage to get me on any of those programs. I'd have just been one of, you know, dozens, hundreds of other bands that were trying to get on those programs with big record labels. So it all goes back to the fact that people here were receptive to something that quirky in its time. And that Top of the Pops put a complete unknown on, doing a very strange little song that you couldn't dance to. Yeah. You know, it's very, very rare for something like that to happen. So. But again, I guess everything that ever happened here in America goes back to that one man at the record company who made it a picture disc. Offering a picture disc. You know, it's just amazing. This is why I'm such a great believer in luck rather than talent, because it's, you know, there are so many things that are incredibly lucky at just the right time that went bump, 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 one after another, and it all happens, you know.
The people that you work with on that tour, I mean, Nick Fisher and Gaslight, were they experienced in doing big shows? I mean, had they worked on arena concerts and stuff like that, or were you all kind of in it together, creating something?
No, I think they had a certain amount of experience. I don't really know what. I mean, they were recommended to me. I think Beggars Banquet put me in touch with them. Not sure how Beggars knew them. And I don't know exactly what experience they'd had before when it comes to putting on these big shows, but they seem to have no problem doing it. And I certainly had every time we would meet, I had reams of papers of little drawings and sketches. I wanted to do this, that, and they would then go off and find a way of making it. You know, most of it was custom built for those tours and never used again, which isn't the best way of going about it, you know, if you actually want to make some money. So every one of them cost an absolute fortune, and then it was put into storage and then ultimately trashed and dumped. So they did really well out of it, I think.
So you'd have drawings when you're talking about you like going forward, but it needs to be diffused, and they would come up with a design or show you a model of how it.
Well, I would say I want it to be this wide, that high, be white or different colours. I want it to look like bars, but not actually be bars. I want it to be able to shine forward, but it's got to be hung because it's going to be this high, so it mustn't be too heavy. Blah blah blah, and then they would actually go off and draw it, and so there'd be a hole there for the plug to go in, and wires coming from there. So they did all that technical side. I'd tell them what I wanted, and they would figure out how to make it.
And so, did you see bits of it before you actually got to the final stage set, or was it literally, it went from being on the plans and they talk about the technical details?
I think I saw a panel in the factory.
Right.
Yeah, I think I saw a panel stood up in the side and it lit up and did its thing, but I didn't actually see it all set up until the first time I went to, was it Roxy Theatre actually? I can't remember where it was. But the first time I actually went into that theatre, and I went in the main door, come at the back where the seats were and just looked down onto the stage, and there it was. And when I first saw it, it was already lit up. It was actually running as I walked in. and it made a huge impression. it just looked huge, absolutely vast, and it was so bright and spectacular. And because this is before moving lights, you didn't have all the lights that can do. Lighting nowadays is just phenomenal. It's always been my favourite part of it, actually. The lighting, I love lighting. In those days, if you wanted anything different, you had to make it, because all you had was your normal little par cans hanging down and strobes, and that was it really, and mirror ball.
Yeah.
So we made.
I didn't go on that tour, unfortunately, but someone said that a lot of the time the audiences were sitting down. Is that?
Yeah, it's always seated. Yeah.
It's quite weird to get your head around.
But it's weird in a way. Oh, you remember though that they're all kids. So as soon as it started, and everyone stood up, and then you'd have the people going around with torches. It's so old-fashioned now, thinking about it. You just don't get that anymore.
Like a long time ago.
But it wasn't the same sort of music as now. So yeah, it's quite a different vibe really, and it was real pop star stuff. So girls would be screaming and all that sort of thing, which is great. But very, very different sort of thing. So people would stand up in there where they were sitting, and then or not actually, just stand still and watch. But it was very pop star syndrome type stuff.
And from that first gig, when was the moment where you looked out and you started seeing people throwing shapes, and was it right from the start you could see people?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I mean,
people dressing up like you. Yeah, people standing there.
Not moving, staring back.
Yeah, they'd take a particular pose from a photograph, whatever it might be. I don't know. And just stand there like that all night, just stand there. And I wouldn't smile and sort of live in the image out in the audience. And it was round about I think just after Berserker when I noticed people starting to mix images together. Maybe on Berserker, people started mixing images together, and that was a bit weird. But the whole image look-alike thing and stand-alike thing, I guess, that was there pretty much from the very beginning. People turning up with the suits on, or the black obviously was quite a big one, the replicas look, and sort of white hair. There's quite a lot of that going on.
So you're on this first tour and you got a massive success. Do you think it was a bit of an adjustment for Paul Gardner at this point, having been in a band together, almost like as this little gang?
Yeah.
To suddenly be part of this huge business.
Yeah, I didn't think about it at the time, to be honest. I sort of too wrapped up in what was going on, I suppose, but I sort of found out later that he was having some problems with it, because it was me and him. Whatever band that we'd been in up until it took off, it was me and him were like the closest to, and then it was me and him and whoever else was in it.
Yeah.
Really, so we'd always been really close. Used to go out a lot, because it was always me and Paul, for example, that would be driving in and out of London past Hammersmith Odeon, when we used to we had like this ritual saying, one day when we drove past it, and I didn't really think too much about how he was dealing with it, because everything just seemed great and vibey. But apparently he was, as the other people come in, Chris and Cedric and all that lot, it all changed. It changed for him a little bit. Not in a massively bad way, I don't think, but what it had been, what was gone really.
Is it true he didn't like heights as well? He didn't like climbing up the towers? Is that?
Yeah, no, not good with that. Well, I'm like that now, anyway. But no, because there's it wasn't that tall though. I think it was Metallicon. At one point, you had to get up and stand up on top of the tower.
Right.
12 feet. It wasn't even that high, And I wasn't good at that. You couldn't get up it, you had to get at this ramp. And you have to run up at it to get up. It was funny. It was an ungainly bloke.
Was the tequila incident on this tour when you went overseas?
Yeah, Pleasure Touring Principal tour. Yeah, that was where was that? Australia, I think. Yeah, the first gig of the Australian tour. So quite important. Everyone's there and all the press are there, and the hostility brewing. around the corner when he drinks, God, I don't know how much, but vast amounts of tequila, and that's to say, not he had the deep heat on his legs, and yeah, he had his legs were aching, so he put deep heat on his legs, and then drank shitloads of tequila, and it all kind of hit him around about the intro tape finished. just all he could do was just like hit his guitar with his hands and just run to the front, and where his lead caught him and pinged him back again. He crashed into his stack, and this last scene being dragged off stage with cries of "My legs are on fire." It was funny. Actually, that's the same tour. He had a go at Chris and Russell about the fact that they were in it, and
oh, right.
Yeah, he got really sort of I'd forgotten that. Yeah, he got a really bit, because he was a bit drunk. He started getting a bit angry. You know, that they weren't real members. They weren't there at the beginning.
Right.
I'd forgotten that actually. It's probably yeah, that all makes sense now. It's obviously just lurking, you know.
Yeah. So how was it on that sort of Far East Australia? Because New Zealand was a bit weird, wasn't it? That was not, when you got there was sort of
well, I nearly got beaten up when we'd only been there an hour or so. Come out the airport and dropped the bags off, went to this club that people had told us about, and they all kicked off there, and we got chased out by skinheads and legging up the street. You know.
Yeah.
All of us, me, crew, I mean, there's a lot of us there, but there was a lot more of them. Bloody hell, that was a bit scary. Cedric and Chris nearly got into a fight in the hotel bar before we even left,
Right.
because they had some problem with Cedric because they thought it looked like he might be black or something. Yeah, so that kicked off. It's just weird, really weird place. And then I think the first gig, there was people turned up outside that said I was anti-Christian, and my lyrics were all against God.
Funny, they'd seen into the future.
Yeah.
Maybe they did.
And then what else happened? First gig, somebody set off a fire alarm and it cut all the power, and it was just. And then one of the journalists started having a go at me because I hadn't bought every single part of the show. I'd left some of it behind.
Right.
And she said, you know, was I being fair to the New Zealand fans that I hadn't bought everything? And I'm going, yeah, for God's sake, you know. And it was a bit of a pain actually. The first, well, in fact, the only New Zealand tour I've ever done it was. Quite a few little glitchy things happened that made it not as much fun as it could have been or should have been. But I think we're going back there next year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, apparently. Because the Australian thing went so well, there's a good chance that we're going back and including New Zealand. So it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
See what the skinhead situation is now, if they remember me.
Because Australia was good the first time round, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite big time. It was enjoyable.
So and tracking back a bit in Europe, I mean, I've read that you in Germany things were going really well, and then you sort of made the connection that when you're actually performing and you're dressed in black, there seemed to be a bit of a strange reaction to it, or not a strange reaction to it, but a reaction to it. Was that? Do you remember that, or was that?
I do remember. But my memory of it is more that I suddenly I started to get criticised for doing Hitler salutes on stage, and then they started to say that I was trying to do the whole Aryan thing, because I had I don't know if I had blonde hair on stage at that time, but certainly on the covers, the whole black uniform type look with the white hair and the whole Aryan look. And of course on stage a lot, I do that a lot, I still do. And they said that I was trying to sort of, it was like I had this Hitler thing going, and
and that was in the German press, was it?
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely in the German press, and I think the press here picked up on it, but it was definitely in the German thing. And it made me really self-conscious all of a sudden, I didn't know what to do with my arms, and I got really embarrassed about it, because there was nothing like that going on at all. You know, I'd made no such connections whatsoever, and it made the whole thing really uncomfortable for a little bit, and I didn't quite know what to do about it. Didn't know what to say about it without, you know, such a habit of saying the wrong thing anyway, and talking myself into trouble rather than out of it. I didn't know how to deal with it at all. But it just went away, actually. It just sort of faded away.
Because obviously, I mean, I think it surprises people sometimes because they always assume that you're massive in Germany, don't they?
Yeah. It's
like, Gary, he must be massive in Germany.
Yeah, why is that?
I suppose it's partly because the whole Berlin thing and the look, I mean, the black clothes and the black leather and all that, and also because a lot of electronic stuff's come out of Germany, obviously Kraftwerk and stuff like that, and bands like Depeche Mode have become massive in Germany,
yeah,
kind of in that sort of gothy black vibe, haven't they?
Yeah. What happened to me then?
So did you go back to Germany?
That was good for a while. I mean, when it was all massive here, it was good there as well. In that first year, it was just pretty much good everywhere. You know, very few places where it wasn't doing, you know, really well or spectacularly well. It was really good. It really just did seem to strike a chord with everyone, and a little bit surprising in that a lot of the countries are like non-English speaking countries as well. But it really did seem to be working.
And in Japan?
Yeah, Japan was brilliant. Japan was great. We went to Japan on the way through to Australia, and it was massive. We were doing really big places and selling them out. They're weird because they, again, it's probably different now, but they clap really quickly, so that then there's a silence because they like to listen to you talking.
Right.
Because I don't say anything, so they go. And we were trying to get, come on, you know, these really embarrassing 20-second gaps. But it was good. I think that was. I had a little break in the Philippines, and I got presented with a gold record, and I didn't even know I had a record out there. And it's kind of like that, you know, wherever you went, even some of these more what seemed obscure places at the time. I had gold albums and gold records and places that I didn't even know I had a deal in. So it was mental, brilliantly mental.